Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today as co-host is Chris Rossini, and he is also the editor of the Ron Paul LibertyReport.com. Chris, welcome to the program, and tell us what we have on the agenda.
Great to be with you, Dr. Paul. Today we're going to talk about the Federal Reserve and the next financial crisis, which we can be certain that it will hit us at some point. What we can't be certain of is how people will react. It'll depend a lot on the dominant ideas that people embrace at the time. But today on our show, we're going to discuss some likely band-aids that we're going to hear, that we may hear from pundits or economists to try to keep their game going. The first thing that we're likely to hear during the next financial crisis is that we need more Fed transparency. Now, does it really matter if the central planners are transparent? Will central planning work if we just get more information out of them, Dr. Paul?
Well, the truth is nothing can fix the Fed, whether it's transparent or not. It is better to have the transparency, obviously, because the people may wake up and who's getting the special deals. But you can have all the transparency in the world, but if it's a failed policy, it's like arguing, well, communism would work if we had more transparency of their planning. Well, it doesn't work like that. So, and the Fed will continue. They don't want transparency, and they will positively be opposed to auditing the Fed. We're glad President-elect Trump has indicated support for transparency of the Fed. I don't hold my breath on that coming about and getting the Fed bill passed, but it would be of some benefit. But the Fed will always argue independence. We have to be independent. We don't want those politicians ever interfering. Yet we know that they have interfered for a long time, and the people behind the scenes are political. The deep state is political. The presidents usually have ways of putting pressure on the Federal Reserve because they make the appointments. So this whole idea that they want to be independent, what they want is total secrecy. They don't want to give anybody any edge to know exactly what they're doing. So we will hear a little bit of this talk. In the last Congress that's closing down right now, there was a bill passed to revamping the Federal Reserve and changing the rules a bit, but it's not likely to happen, and the Fed will continue. But the flaw is that nobody knows what the proper interest rates would be for a smooth functioning economy. And that is the flaw of central economic planning. That is the flaw that has given us the bubbles and the distortions and the malinvestments, the excessive debt, and all the economic problems we have is the fact that we march along, the people believe, and most people in Congress believe it's very necessary for these smart people to run things because that's what they have been taught. Fortunately for our side of the argument, in the last 6, 8, 10 years, we have been able to get some attention by the man in the street and the people outside of Washington, even those who have to be establishment-oriented, acknowledge, well, maybe the Fed isn't doing a great job, and maybe they did keep interest rates too low too long. So I think it's great to talk about, the Federal Reserve and policy, but you can't fix it because it's a system that is unworkable. The sooner we realize, the better.
Yes, the next thing that we're likely to hear during the next Fed meltdown from some corners is that the Fed just needs some strict rules that it needs to follow. And if we know anything from the U.S. Constitution, people in power love to follow rules. They do it all the time. So, Dr. Paul, will shackling the Fed with a set of arbitrary rules save us from all the malinvestments that are created and the boom-bust cycle?
Talking about rules and who follows the rules, thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of rules illegally because they're just written by the executive branch against the people, and they're supposed to be enforced. But there's a very little compact book of rules for our government, and they never follow those rules. So, that, of course, is the Constitution. But what you're talking about is this specific approach done by conservatives and Republicans that recognize the Fed's not doing a good job. They want to get some more power back to the Congress and not in this secret body. And that wouldn't be too bad of an idea to put it back in the Congress if the Congress did what they're supposed to do, and that is make legal tender gold and silver. That is their responsibility, and not to use anything else as legal tender and not to use fiat money. But the in-between thing is supposed to be the compromise, and sometimes the compromise takes the worst of each side. And what they want to do is write a rule that directs the Federal Reserve to respond in a certain manner if they see interest rates, if they see prices going up, or if the unemployment rate is going up, then they have to do certain things. It's sort of like after the fact, after the problems are out there, after the inflation. For instance, right now, we're going to be suffering the consequence of the inflation of the past 10 years. It's going to seep into the economy, and you're going to have an explosion, of price inflation. Well, it's a little bit too late to have a rule. The rule should have been written a long time ago that the Fed isn't allowed to inflate. But the one rule that has floated around in the proposal by the House, that they passed it in the House and didn't get any further than that because the President and the Senate didn't deal with it, it follows the plan of what they call the Taylor rule. And basically that says that if you have prices going up, inflation, and they don't say exactly how to measure inflation because it's measured all kinds of ways. Consumer prices, producer prices, the price of stocks, the price of bonds, all these things. But if prices go up, a certain percentage, if prices go up 1%, they have to raise the interest rates more than 1% to turn off the machine. And this is the whole thing. When the economy gets moving in a free market, this is good news, because it drives the prices down. But in a managed economy, if the market gets going too fast and there's a little bit of excitement about great prosperity and things are moving good, if it's based on honest and economic policies that are good, this would be very good, and prices would go down. So they interpret anything that looks like the economy's being overly stimulated, it's getting too hot. We have to turn it off again. They're obsessed with planning, and they think a rule will do this. Since the Fed is all over the place, and you don't know what they're going to do until after they make the announcement, and they don't deal with the real problems. They hide it when they bail out companies and corporations and foreign governments and the banks. It's all done in secrecy. It's done overseas, and a rule is not going to change it. The only rule they need to follow is the rule that the founders wrote in the Constitution, because they were very much aware of runaway inflation. The continental dollar was a disaster at the beginning of our country because the continental dollar went to zero, and that's where the saying comes, it's not worth a continental, not worth anything. And someday it's not worth $1. And the paper money right now isn't worth a whole lot, other than the fact that people still trust it. But that's the only rule that we should follow, and keep money honest and not have these computers running. The Keynesians believe in computers and plans and dictates, and you respond. So the conservatives who want to move in the direction of getting a little more control of the Federal Reserve, they're making a mistake, because they're joining Keynesianism, which thinks that they can get a computer and measure human action, the human action telling us what interest rates should be and how much people should spend and invest. These should all be market decisions. So these rules will not solve the problem. And like I said, there's only one rule they ought to follow, and that is the prohibition against Congress or the Federal Reserve ever making anything other than silver and gold legal tender.
Usually, Dr. Paul, during one of the Fed's many crises that they create, we get to see who the real bad actors, who the real crooked actors were during the artificial boom. Many of them get away with it. They're close to power, but then there are the unlucky few who get the handcuffs put on them, and they're paraded in front of TV cameras to show that something is being done. We may see in the next crisis an appeal to change the people who are in power, who are in the Fed or whatever. Will changing the guard actually change anything, though?
No, it won't change it. Like I said, it's an unmanageable system. And the people who are responsible for this are the ones that manage the monetary system. But the people that, commit the crimes, because even in a totally free market, libertarian society where it's accepted that the morality of money means that we have to have gold and silver, you still have to have prohibitions and penalties for fraud. And one example on how you deal with those kind of problems happened with the Enron scandal. There was a lot of fraud and abuse and cheating and all these kind of things, but it wasn't the federal government, all the federal government regulations since written since the 1930s didn't prohibit this. And of course, the Enron brought in the Sarbanes-Oxley, more regulations which didn't prevent the next crisis. But they think that, if you don't have the SEC and the federal government and all these people cracking down, who's going to take care of that? Well, Enron was taken care of without it, even though the SEC had all these rules, and I'm sure they were broken, and they were supposed to monitor this and prevent these problems. It was a state law here in Texas that, filed the charges and ended up putting people in prison for the committing of fraud. So, yes, there would be rules against fraud, and the closer to home, the better. This would mean that still New York would still have a lot of responsibility for people committing fraud, but it would be out of the hands of people believing that all we need are more regulations. Now we have now we have Frank bill, Sarbanes-Oxley, and also Barney Frank's bill. And that is not going to work. They're going to get around it and find some way to do it, but there should be strict rules against fraud, and you can do that in a free market economy. The big fraud right now is the fraud of fiat money, the pretense that there's real value there. It is fraudulent when you create money out of thin air. It is morally equivalent to counterfeit, and then it's given to the privileged class. It doesn't get passed out in the street to the poor people. The massive amounts of dollars, trillions of dollars, it's passed out to the friends in the banking industry and in the financial industry because they're all too big to fail. And besides, you bail them out and it'll trickle down and take care of the people. But of course, this massive bailout we've had in the last 8 years hasn't trickled down at all, but a lot of money has been spent with the pretense that all we have to do is have more inflation of the currency and pass it out and solve these problems. It doesn't work. It's not going to work.
Finally, the final thing that we may hear during the next financial crisis created by the Fed is that the Fed should be stripped of all its printing press powers, and that power should be granted to the Congress. So, Dr. Paul, is that a good solution to have congressmen have the ability to print money? And to close the show, if you could give us a good rundown of what the real solutions are to these problems that we keep facing thanks to the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who argue the case because they know that the monetary issue is in Article 1, Section 8, that it says Congress has the responsibility over the monetary system. But like I said, the responsibility was to make sure that it was backed by silver and gold. And so it should, in this way, taken out of the hands of this body that is quasi-government, created by government, then has the secrecy of this, and they have this horrendous power to create money and pass it out. So yes, the argument to go back, and that's a populist notion. But most populists, and we have heard a lot of talk of populism here lately, most populists believe that you should print the money and Congress gets to pass it out. Well, that's still inflation. That's not honoring the gold standard and having, maybe a certificate, a gold certificate or something, and maintain order that way. So it's something that Congress would abuse too. The Congress has the responsibility to give us an honest currency, and that, of course, would be the gold and silver. Now, as far as what's going to happen, we're going to have a crisis, and right now there's a lot of suggestions of different things, everything from these gold rules and what Congress is going to do. But I'll tell you what, I think it's facing a big problem coming up. I think the spending is going to explode. I think interest rates are going to go up, even though the Fed will keep interest rates low. There's a limit, because if you keep interest rates low when the market is demanding much higher rates, then there's a loss of confidence in the dollar, and that would be, a disaster. But I think the spending is going up, the debt is going up, the pressure will be put on the Fed. The Fed will have to monetize, the debt, and we're going to be in another crisis. Of course, it's not a brand new crisis. I think of the ongoing crisis from the time when I became fascinated with monetary policy, and that was 1971. And it's been progressive. Every decade, it gets worse. This so-called recovery is the worst one since 1971, getting out of it because the old rules don't work. Just printing more money doesn't work. And now they're talking about, in the next administration, well, we have to massively increase spending. We have to spend on highways and bridges and military and revamp all these things. But I don't think the revenue is going to be there, and the pressure will be put on the Fed. The one thing that's interesting is some people think there may be some competition, and that's hard for me to understand because I think the deep state has so much control. But there could be, this breakout, it would be a big event if the Fed became competitive with the administration and wants to make things worse for the administration. I'm not predicting that, but I know some people think that. It would be devastating. But I think the control behind this system, whether it's spending on military and running up debt and monetizing debt, I think that's sort of locked in place. And the sentiments are the same. I mean, Congress is not willing, to cut back. Matter of fact, if even when President-elect Trump suggested we cut back on the F-35, and that should have never been built, there's all those members of Congress, no, you can't do that. It hurts my jobs in my district. So that's the pressure they're going to have. So since the spending has been there, the inflation has been there, the distortion is there, the next recession is going to come on top of a continuous weak economy, 95 million people underemployed in this country. So on top of that, we're going to see another downturn, and all they'll have left to do, the only policy they will be able to address under current situation, spend more money and print more money and have more debt. And it won't work. It's leading to a major crisis. The sooner this country wakes up, the better. So I think that we have to say that our efforts are to try to get a message out so the American people pay a lot more attention to this because it's solvable. It's not complicated. I've always claimed I could teach a 12-year-old exactly what monetary policy is by getting a game of Monopoly out, and playing with Monopoly money. But anyway, there's been a lot of, teaching of economics and a lot of brainwashing on economic policy. It's solidified in the Congress. But I want to, of course, thank everybody for tuning in to the Mythbuster. And Christopher, thank you very much for being with us today, and I hope everybody has a Merry Christmas.
Thank you too, Dr. Paul. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Good to see everybody. Come back soon to the Ron Paul Liberty Room.